In this video, I'm going to walk you through how you can set up your own solo mining pool using MiningCore. In a previous video, I talked about setting up your solo mining pool using NOMP, and about a year ago, I also put out a video on how to run your own mining pool using MiningCore. And this was a really popular video. A lot of people started spinning up MiningCore instances, messaged me lots of questions. I went ahead and I took everything from that setup and kind of Dockerized everything. So you can now run MiningCore in Docker on your home network if you want. And this is going to allow you to solo mine tons of coins. So earlier in this solo mining series, we covered NOMP, which has a lot of the legacy algorithms, but not a lot of current algorithms. MiningCore is kept relatively up to date. The last code update on this was actually about a month ago. So it is being actively developed, and if we take a look at like the GitHub history on this thing, and we just scroll down a bit, we're going to see there's things in here like the Flex algo, which is the new Kyla coin CPU mining algo. It's in here. Pepe Pal's in here. Meow Pal's in here. So you're going to see a lot of more modern algorithms in here. Arum's in here. All the Kapow coins are supported by this. Vertcoin is supported by this. Ubiq is supported by this. So you have tons of flexibility of what you can do with this. And so we want to set this up on our home network. This is actually kind of my go-to pool. If this doesn't support an algorithm, I will look at like NOMP or YEMP for those. But the idea here is this should be our go-to pool because it is really kept up to date. It's got a lot of those newer algorithms in it. This is really what we want to be using for spec mining. Now, this setup's going to be a little bit more complex in that it involves several Docker containers to get it running. And going into it, you kind of want to have a plan. You want to decide, do you want to run, and there's a couple caveats here, do you want to run a Vertcoin pool? If so, there's an additional perimeter that you will need. And we're actually going to be doing that today. I'm going to show you because for me, I want Vertcoin included in the supported coins. So there's a little bit of a setup you got to do beforehand to make that happen. And then if you scroll down to these caveats, there's also a caveat for Monero and Zcash. So just keep that in mind if you're going to be doing either of those coins. So essentially what we're going to be doing is we're going to be sending up a few Docker containers here. One's going to be for the backend process. One's going to be for the web UI. One is going to be for the database backend. And one's going to be to manage the database front end. We're also going to set up portainer. And this is because it makes it a lot easier to generate your wallet addresses. If you're not too familiar with CLI or you don't want to have to remote into the machine all the time, you want to kind of do it from a web UI, it'll make things a little bit easier for you there. And we're also going to be setting up a Vertcoin daemon, and we're going to be basically setting this up as a Vertcoin pool. And that is because in order to run Vertcoin, there is an additional perimeter you have to pass in when you create the Docker container. Now, you can always delete the container and create a new one with the perimeter if you decide to add Vertcoin in the future. You won't lose your database. You won't lose any of your data store, any of your mining pool config, or anything like that. So it is easy to add that back in if you need to. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to install the container for Vertcoin because we need the Vertcoin. There's a verthash.dat file that gets created. And if you're familiar with mining or Vertcoin wallets, whenever you open the wallet, a lot of times that first time it'll say create in verthash.dat, or the first time you mine, it creates that verthash.dat. That's kind of like their memory file that they use. It's sort of like a proof of RAM file, if you will. And that is needed by the mining pool as well. So to make this happen, what we do is we sync the node. It's going to generate that file. We point the mining pool to that file. To get the Vertcoin node up and running and started syncing, what we're going to do is we're going to create a folder called .vertcoin. And then we're going to do sudo docker. Now, if you don't have Docker installed already, you could just do a sudo apt install docker.io. But if you're following along with the other solo mining tutorial series videos, you know that we've already got Docker installed. It's our baseline for doing pretty much everything in this series. So we're going to do a sudo docker run. And if you followed those previous videos, this is going to look very similar. So we're going to do sudo docker run -d to run this detached, -- network host, -- log -opt space max -size equals 10m. This is going to run detached, do a network of the host. So instead of natting the Docker container, it's going to share the host network. This is going to optimize our latency. And then our log option of max size, it'll make sure our Docker log file is never bigger than 10 megabytes. And then we need to do a volume mapping. We're going to map /home/pool, because that's my username, .vertcoin. This is the folder we just created, :, and we're going to map that to /root/.vertcoin. That's the path on the Docker container. And then we just need to give it the image name, which is going to be the retro mic, :node, or /nodes rather, :vertcoin. We do this, hit enter. This is going to download the image. And then once that image is downloaded, it's going to start the container. So we're just going to give this a few seconds, let it download, extract, and run. Okay, now the Vertcoin process should be running. If we want to double check what we're looking for here, we can just do an ls.vertcoin. And you now see this vert hash.dat file. It's probably still creating it, but this is the file that we need to give to MiningCore. While the blockchain's syncing, we can go ahead and continue the setup of the other Docker containers. So the first thing we're going to do is we need to set up a data store for Postgres. This is the actual database engine we're going to be running. So I'm going to create a folder called Postgres, and I'm going to create a folder inside that called data. And then we're also going to create a folder called .miningcore. And then we're going to move into the .miningcore folder. And we're going to run a wget with this URL. Now these commands will be included in the video description, so you can just copy and paste them. But essentially what we're doing is we are downloading the coins.json file. And this contains basically all the supported coins within the system. Now, if we do a nano coins.json, here you can see basically every coin that MiningCore will know about. If you ever want to add another coin, you can just add it in here as long as the algorithm is already supported. And you can tell that algorithm with the family section. So, and in a combination between that and kind of that Coinbase header. So obviously we know that things like Bitcoin or SHA-256, AI Power Grid is an example of KPOW. So that has a family of ProgPow and a ProgPow of KPOW. So that is kind of what you're looking at. In a future video, we'll cover how you can add like new KPOW coins to this list, since that seems to be the trend of what's coming out. For now, you just want to make sure the coin that you want to mine is in this list. So for us, it's Vertcoin. We already know it's in the list, so we're going to just do Control-X, close that out of that. We're going to move back up to our home folder. And the next thing we want to do is we want to set up Postgres. So I'm going to, let's see here, grab this command. So this is going to be a sudo docker run. Again, we're going to run detach, we're going to name it Postgres. It's going to do a port mapping. So if you notice, we're not doing a network of hosts on this one. We're letting this NAT because we don't necessarily care about the latency to the database itself. It's not as critical as it is submitting it to the blockchain. And then this is going to be your default username and password that you want it to be. So for me, I'm just going to do admin, and I'm going to use this as the password. And we're going to map the volume to, actually that is wrong. This should be a slash here. So it's going to be home/pool/.postgres/data. And we're going to map that to var lib postgres /data. Go ahead. And then we're just going to use the Postgres container. So this is not a customized container. This is just the standard one put out by the Postgres team. We're going to go ahead and let that download and spin up that container. And then once that's spun up, the next one's going to be pgadmin. Now this is a web UI that allows us to kind of manage the Postgres database. So we don't have to connect to the Docker container and run a bunch of command line scripts. We can do it all through a nice web UI interface. So this is going to be sudo docker run -d. We're going to name it pgadmin. Restart always. Again, we're going to be using port mapping here. So we're going to map port 8080 to port 80, or this can be whatever port you want the web UI to run on. And then you have to give it a default email address and password. This is going to be the account you use to log into the web dashboard. So for me, I'm just going to use admin@admin.com as the username and capital PISSW0RD as the password. And once that's started, we should be able to hop on over to this port 8080 and access the web UI. So let's do http://192.168.111 is the IP of the system. We'll do port 8080. After a few minutes, this should come up. And for the username, we're going to do admin@admin.com because that's what we specified in the docker run command. And then we're going to enter the password we specified. Hit login. And this is going to log us in. We're going to do a register server. So you want to right click on servers, do register server. And then we're just going to call this mining pool. And then on the connection, you can just do the IP of the system. So for us, it's going to be a 111. And then the username and the password that we specified in the when we spun up the Postgres container. So in our case, I'm using the same for both. And then just hit, and then we're going to tell this to save it so it auto logs us in every time. And let's go ahead and hit save. And you can see now it has connected to that, and we should have a master database in here, which we do. So what I like to do is I like to create a new login called MiningCore. So that's what we're going to do here. And then we're going to specify a password for it. And then no expiration, which is good. Privileges, it needs to be able to log in. And for this, all of this can pretty much stay as it is. And then we're going to hit save. And then we're going to right click on databases. We're going to create a new database. I'm going to call this MiningCore. The owner of this can be the MiningCore account, because that's actually what we're going to use to log in out of the MiningCore system. And hit save. All right. Now we can right click on this and do query tool. Now we want to hop back on over to the GitHub for MiningCore. Go to the source folder, and then go to the MiningCore folder, and then go to persistence, and then Postgres, scripts, and there's a script called createdb. We're going to go ahead and copy this entire thing. Copy that. Come over here. If we paste this in, we should be able to run this. So it ran it, and if we now expand schemas and expand tables, we now have all of the tables for MiningCore. So all this did was this just created the whole database structure for us. Now we can hop back on over to our putty screen on the system that we were running everything in. Now, before we start up the MiningCore container, we need to create a pool config file. So to do that, we're going to do a nano.miningcore, and I'm just going to call this config.json. This is going to be our MiningCore config file. Typically, I like to start with a sample if we have a sample. So if we hop back on over to the GitHub and go into the examples folder, these are all example JSONs for spinning up a pool. So for us, obviously, Vertcoin's not in here, but we could start with another template if we wanted, or I actually already have a template for Vertcoin, so that's what I'm going to use. Typically, if I'm starting with something, usually I like to go with like Litecoin or Bitcoin. These are pretty standard, and you can basically just copy and paste this whole thing. But like I said, I already have an example, so I'm going to grab my example. All right, I'm going to go ahead and paste in my example config file. And what we've got is we've got the logging section, the banning section. We've got a notifications, which I have disabled for both admin and regular notifications. The persistence is going to be the Postgres database. So you can just kind of leave this as default. Whatever password you use when you set up that MiningCore account through the PG admin portal, this is going to be the user. This is going to be the password that we used on the login. And then the database is going to be the database that we created. And then payment processing, if you want to change how frequently you're sending out payments, you can adjust that here. And then API, I would just leave that as default. And then pools, this is where you're going to define each and every pool. And this can be a comma separated section. So if you're not familiar with JSON, you can use an online editor like JSON editor. And I can actually show you how you could do that. If we just Google JSON editor, I like to use the JSON formatter one. If you paste in here, this will actually give you a tree view of kind of what all those sections look like. And then if we needed to add a pool, here you can see we've got this pool. If we just wanted to add another section to this, we could just come in, we could put a comma here, and then open, close curly brace, and then hit this little right arrow. This will basically bring everything back over based on whatever we changed. And you can see we now have two pools. So within this block is where you would take, if you wanted to spin up a Litecoin pool as an example, we could come to the Litecoin example and we could grab everything that is within these curly braces here. And we could put that over here. Just make sure you put that comma there. Put that there. If we hit this arrow again, scroll down, we can see we now have two pools. We've got our Vertcoin pool, but we also have a Litecoin pool now as well, with all of that information in here. So this is a quick way just to make sure that you're getting the right config in place and that's valid JSON. And then you could always just Control A, copy, paste that over into your config file. Now we have our baseline config. However, we need to adjust some things here. We're going to go down to the daemon section of Vertcoin. And this is where we need to specify the port number that we're going to be running the Vertcoin RPC on. I'm going to run this on port 9002. I'm going to set the username, the pool user, the password, the pool password. I'm going to show you how to set that on the Vertcoin side of things. And then on the Verthash data file, we're just going to leave the /verthash.dat. And what we're going to do is when we run the Docker container for MiningCore, we're going to map our node verthash.dat file to this path. And so it'll always pull off of the node. Another thing we have to do is we have to create a wallet address for the mining rewards to hit. This has to be a new wallet on the node. So in order to do that, I like to run portainer, or you can do this through CLI. I covered how to do this as CLI in the NOP video when I talked about spinning up Peercoin. But for this video, we're actually going to use portainer. So in order to do portainer, the first thing we're going to do is a sudo docker volume create. We're going to call it portainer underscore data. Let's go ahead and do that. And then we're going to basically just do a simple docker run command, which is going to be, we're going to, again, run a detach. We're going to map port 8000 and 9443. We're going to name it portainer. We're going to set it to restart always. We're going to map var run docker.sock. This is going to give it visibility into all of the Docker containers we have, and also kind of give it control over those. And then we're going to map that volume that we just created to /data. Let's go ahead and hit enter. Now if we hop on over to our browser and go to https:// the IP address :9443, might get a certificate error. Just go ahead and say proceed. And here it's going to tell us that it's a brand new install. We have to set up a password. The password has to be at least 12 characters long. So go ahead and pick something that you will remember that is at least 12 characters long. I'm going to say create user. I'm going to uncheck collection of stats. Then once we're logged in, we're going to hit home, click local. And if we click 7 containers, this is going to show us all the containers that are running on our system. And we should be able to see Vertcoins in here. So on the Vertcoin one, let's go ahead and open that. We can click the console tab, hit connect. This will actually put us into the Docker container. So if you remember on the Peercoin video, I did all this through CLI. I was using sudo docker exec/it and then telling it to throw me into the shell. This is just giving you an easier way to do that. So now if we do usr/bin/ we should have Vertcoin in here. We do CLI. And if we do a get balance, we can see that there's no wallet. We need to create a wallet. So we're just going to do create wallet. And I'm going to name it default. So it has created the wallet. Now if we do the get balance again, we should get 0.0. Which we do. So now we can get a wallet address. So we want to do vertcoin-cli space get new address. And then we want to do a space. We're going to do empty quotes. And then we want to do a space, and we want to type a legacy in double quotes here. This is going to get us a legacy formatted address, which is what MiningCore requires. So this is going to be the address that we need. We're going to go ahead and copy this. Now if we hop back on over to our mining server, or mining pool server rather, we're going to open that config file again. So we did that nano miningcore.miningcore/config.json. We're going to come down to this section, replace the wallet address with the new one that we created. Go ahead and do that. And at this point, this should be all pretty much set up. Do Control X, Y, enter to save. Now we need to create a config file for Vertcoin. So to do that, we're going to nano.vertcoin/vertcoin.conf. And in this file, we want to do server equals 1, RPC port equals 9002. Make sure that matches what we put in the config file for the pool for MiningCore. RPC user is going to be pool user. RPC password is going to be pool password. Control X, Y, enter. And now, if we do a sudo docker restart Vertcoin. Now if we hop back on over to portainer, we can get back to the container rather. And if we go logs, this will allow us to view the real-time logs as well. we can see that this thing is still syncing. So this may take a while to sync up this blockchain. But while that blockchain is syncing, we can finish the setup of MiningCore. How to run MiningCore now, we're going to do a sudo docker run -d. We're going to give it a name of MiningCore, restart always, network host. We're going to do 2 volume mappings on this one. The first one's going to be to that pool config file that we created. So it's going to be /home/pool/.miningcore/config.json. We're going to map that to app/config.json. It's very important that that remains. And then we're also going to do a volume mapping of coins.json to app-build-coins.json. And then the third mapping we're going to do is if you're running Vertcoin, we're going to map home/pool/.vertcoin/verthash.dat. Again, this is the Vertcoin node folder. So that's where we're grabbing that from. And we're going to be mapping that to ./verthash.dat. And we're using my MiningCore Docker container. And hit enter and run. Now the container is up and running. We can hop on over to portainer. And if we give this a refresh, we can see MiningCore is listed here now. If we click on MiningCore, we go to logs. We can see that for Vertcoin, it's waiting for the daemon to sync the whole blockchain. It's still syncing up the headers, so that's why it says 0.00. Once those headers are synced, this will start incrementing slowly until the entire blockchain is done. You won't be able to mine to this pool until the blockchain is fully synced, but this tells us that the connection is good between the mining pool software and the node. So everything is set up. Now it's basically a waiting game. Now, if you want a web UI to be able to view how many times you're hitting blocks, things like that, what the payouts are, what the hash rates are, then there's a web UI component you can set up as well. So we're going to do that now while we're waiting for that to sync. And to do that, you're just going to do a git clone on one of my repositories. So this is going to be github.com/theretromike/miningcore.webui.git. And then we're going to save that into the .miningcore webui folder. And then we're going to run a really simple Docker container. It's going to use a real lightweight web server, and it's going to serve up the web UI for those files. So this is going to be the command you're going to run. It's going to be sudo docker run -d port. I'm going to be running this on port 81. However, if you want to run this on a different port, you can. We're already running nomp on the server on port 80, so that's why I'm opting for port 81 here. You can name it whatever you want to name it. The volume mapping, this is important. You want to map the .miningcore webui folder to user/share/nginx/html. Go ahead and hit enter. So we'll download that container. Should be super quick. It's a really lightweight container. And that's going to start up the web UI on port 81. Now, one thing to be aware with this UI now is if we go to it, if we go to 111:81, you're not going to see the pool listed here until the daemon is fully synced. If you're running other pools, you may not see those here either, but they are running in the background. It's just that it's waiting for all of the pools to get fully synced up first. So that is kind of what we're waiting for at this point. So once the node is fully synced, then you'll be able to mine to it. Now I'm going to hop on over to another pool that I'm actually already running on MiningCore to show you what that looks like. So if we do 74:81, this is what it'll look like. Now I am running more than just Vertcoin on this one. I've also got Procyon and BetGenius running on here. These are 2 other modern Capal coins. So for Vertcoin, you'll be able to see how many blocks you're hitting, how much it has paid out, what the network hash rate is, and what the pool hash rate is. And because we're solo mining on our local network, This pool hash rate is going to be that total hash that I have on the network. So if we click into it, we can see under blocks, these are all of the blocks that we found. There was one orphan block here. So obviously we didn't get any type of rewards for that one, but the rest of these were all good blocks. You can see overall, it's actually pretty good luck. I've gotten recently an 8% effort block, a 10% effort block, 14% effort block, 5% effort block, and then obviously there's a couple high ones mixed in there. But overall, if you sum those up together, that puts us at about 121% effort. Not perfect, but over time, this should balance out. So right now, we'd be a little better pool mining, but I'm not too worried about that. Over time, it tends to kind of work itself out. And then if we head on over to the dashboard, if you want to put your wallet address in here, this will load stats for your wallet address. Plug in this wallet address real quick, and you can see that our lifetime balance obviously matches what the pool payout has been globally for the pool. Today we've earned 12.5. Pending balance will pretty much be non-existent because we've got our minimum payout set to basically be less than what the block reward is. So every time we're hitting a block, we're getting that payout pretty much immediately. These are our pending shares. This is our average hash rate over time. I'm mining this with a 8 by RX 562 gig rig. So we fluctuate between like 1.8 and 2.6 mega hash across that system. And then if you head on over to the connect section, this will give you the stratum endpoint that you should be connecting to. And that's pretty much all there is to get it set up. Now, when you're mining, all the coins will hit this pool wallet, and then that pool wallet will pay out to whatever wallet you're specifying in your miner. So you will mine to this just as if you would mine to any other pool. You will use your personal wallet address as the wallet. You can specify a worker name if you want. So that's what you're seeing here. I'm actually mining this from MMPOS. MMPOS is sending in that worker name. Password can be X or whatever you want. The password really isn't used. And that is pretty much all there is to it. If you're interested in wanting to know how to run other MiningCore coins, definitely drop me a comment below. Let me know what algorithms or coins that you're interested in, and I can see about possibly doing a future video on those. I know when I did my MiningCore video, there were a lot of people that were wanting to know how to run Vertcoin, so I decided to include Vertcoin in this video for getting MiningCore up and running. Again, the biggest caveat I will say to this is that when you are setting up a new coin, make sure that that blockchain is fully synced before you kind of throw it into MiningCore. Otherwise, your web UI is not going to really render until all of the coins are fully synced, up and running. So that's kind of the only drawback here. But once that blockchain is synced, then you should be good to go.